Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a good weekend. By the way, I had a psychologist speaking on our webinar on Thursday night, David Abramson, great guy. And he pointed out that the average child, that would be any school-going kid in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, after school hours spends 7 hours a day on their internet. Is that not mind-blowing? So how much time do we really spend with their kids? I challenge you all. I'm even happy to repeat them. I will give you all books. The books cost 500 Rand each. You undertake to go through one a day with your kids because they're such great values. And that way we can all spend a bit more time. So if anybody's interested to take up the offer, please WhatsApp me and you spend 10 minutes, and even if it's on Shabbos, just in proper discussion with your kids. What is wealth? What's humility? Etc., etc. What does it mean to serve God? So all I want is that people should undertake that the kids should learn them. Or more importantly, that we should spend more time with our kids. Proper interactive. It doesn't mean that I'm sitting with my kid at the table and I'm on my phone and my kid's on my phone. That's not what it means. It means absolutely interactive story. Okay, let us start. Any questions? Okay. Now, we're at the third Mishnah. Everybody got it? If anybody please needs a text, please WhatsApp me. I will give you one. I will send you one. I'll tell you to pick it up from Chabad House or whatever. Yossi ben Yoed. No, sorry, before that. So we've had the lineage started. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and he passed it on to Joshua to the elders, and eventually gets to Yehuda Nossi. He writes it down into book form. The Mishnah becomes part of that book. But before all of that, after the men of the Great Assembly, the person who took over after the men of the Great Assembly, the remnant of the men of the Great Assembly, was none other than Shimon HaTzadik. He also became the first of a series of sages which we call Tanoim. They really authored the Mishnah, right? He passed on the entire tradition to Antignos Ish Seicher. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only teaching that we hear of Antignos Ish Seicher in the entire Torah. So he receives, it's the third Mishnah, he receives the entire teaching from Shimon HaTzadik. Now, Shimon HaTzadik was that individual all we could say about him is, all we're saying about him is that he was so godly. I mean, he rubbed shoulders with the angels. When Alexander the Great came to destroy Israel, and he bumped into Antigonus, and he bumped into Shimon HaTzadik, he jumped off his horse and he bowed to him, and his general said, "Why are you bowing to the Jew who we're going to destroy?" He said, no, wherever I go to war, I see a holy face leading me. This is the man. Shimon HaTzadik was able to teleport himself. It's also connected to this week's Torah portion, teleporting. Maybe if we have time at the end of the show, we'll discuss it. But Antignos Ish Seicher, he gets the entire Torah from Shimon HaTzadik, and he would say like this. He had a very simple teaching life. Al tiyu ka'avodim hamishamshin es haras al manas lekabel pras. Do not be like servants who serve their master to receive a reward. Elo ka'avodim mishamshin es haras shelo al manas lekabel pras. But rather be like servants who serve their master not to receive a reward. And the final teaching, and let the fear of heaven be upon you. And of course, we're doing these series of shiurim in memory of Mark Weiner. And if there's anybody else who would like to dedicate it in memory of their father or mother, whoever, grandparents or whatever, and also my father-in-law, Rabbi Tanzer, that is the series of shiurim. And the words that come out of our mouths become real energies for them in heaven. The most important thing is let's not learn them as learnings, as teachings. Let's learn them that we can actually put them into practices and tools to change our lives and the lives of people around us. So what does it mean, don't serve God? Don't be like a servant who serves his master in order to receive a reward. Paramount to Jewish education is reward and punishment. A kid does well, you reward a kid. You know, the way you start a kid learning on his optional when he turns 3 is you put honey on the aleph beis. And when the kid learns aleph beis, he licks the aleph beis, he licks the honey off and you throw him sweets. Jewish learning has to be with reward. It's imperative to teach a kid reward and discipline. That's fundamental to Jewish belief. When I was a kid, and my memory serves me correctly, there was a famous American doctor called Dr. Spock, and he wrote a medical journal for housewives, for mothers. It became like a Bible for people. Every question you ever had, you look into Dr. Spock's book. It was like the Google of the day. But I think he also wrote a book on the psychology of kids, and they blamed him for destroying a generation of American kids, where he said, don't punish a kid, let a kid have what he wants when he wants it. That is his philosophy. The Torah doesn't like that. The Torah likes discipline for doing naughty, reward for being good. And it's imperative that a kid is brought up that way, that when I do good, I get rewarded for it. But Antigone said, hold on a second. As you get older and as you mature in life, well, of course, that has to be the beginning of your program, right? But ultimately, you have to transcend that. Ultimately, you have to have a relationship with God that it is just you fall in love with God, not because of reward, like a husband loves a wife, or like a child likes a parent. It's not because of reward. It's not because of anything, because I love you. I love you, Daddy, in heaven, like my spouse. I love you like my parent. I love you, I love you, I love you. It's not because of what you give me. So you do give me things, whatever. You give me health, you give me all these things. But that's secondary. I have to get out of that. I have to be able to serve God on a far more mature level. He then goes on to say that at the same time, the fear of heaven has to be upon you. Because if you only have love is only one motivator. I want you to look at a bird. A bird has two wings. The right wing is love. The left wing is fear. In order to soar up on high, you need both. Love is the shoyrish, it's the root, it's the driving force of all the do mitzvahs, the positive mitzvahs. Fear, is what holds you back from sinning. So he said, as much as you have love, you also have to have discipline. And by the way, I'm convinced that most relationships do not fall apart because of lack of love. They fall apart because of lack of discipline. Okay, on every level, breaking boundaries, breaking barriers. So what he's really saying over here is that you have to have love and fear. Now I want to share with you, just while we're speaking about love and fear, there are some people who can get to the level of Hashem, the love of Hashem. There are some people, how do you get love within you? So some of us are brought up, we have actually, because of experiences in life, because we've been hurt, God forbid, because of this, because of that, we have a whole bunch of reasons why that brings us to a cold heart. We have a cold heart. Our heart, although we're filled with emotion, although we've got a fortune, we've got a wellspring of love, we don't allow, for whatever reason, we don't allow that love to come out. We have like a stone love. So how do you get that love out? And by the way, a question you should all have, it says in the Torah, and you shall love the Lord your God. How can Hashem tell me to love him? You can't tell me to love my mother-in-law. I either do or I don't. You can't tell me to love that person. I either do or I don't. Love is an emotion in the heart. You can tell me to put on tefillin. You can tell me to light Shabbos candles, but you can't tell me to love. Love is an emotion in the heart. And the truth of the matter is, if a person would get up in the morning and just think for a moment about Hashem, how Hashem fills all the worlds, how Hashem transcends all the worlds, how Hashem, all the things that Hashem does for us, all of a sudden we'll start to feel that love. So why does the Torah tell you should love Hashem? Because it comes from the meditation before that, Shema Yisrael. When you'll think about God, that God is everything is God, you will fall in love with Hashem. You'll have this burning love with Hashem. I'll tell you another way. Here's a great meditation to fall in love with Hashem. There's a rule that just as water reflects, or let's use modern terminology, because it's based on a sentence in the Torah, just as water reflects, or just as a mirror reflects my face, so is the heart of a person to another person. In other words, the way I look at the mirror looks back at me. Now, if in my heart I feel love for another person, and I feel good, not jealousy and not hatred and not nastiness, but I feel good about another person. Hello, you with me? Sorry, I'm not using my computer, so I get cut off if a phone call comes through. If I start thinking lacquer about another person, not only do I begin to behave with that person in a different way. In other words, I just talk to him nicely. He can pick it up. The nuances, the way I treat him, the way I treat her, you can feel it. But besides that, hard to explain this 200 years ago, but it's Bluetooth. My heart sends a message to his heart, and he feels that I love him. And therefore, my heart, when I have a good heart about other people, if everybody around you is fighting with you, just change the way you think about people. You'll see it'll change. Law of attraction. So when I love somebody within me, when I care for somebody within me, the person can pick it up. And even if they started off with a negative perception, somehow they feel that they get to realize that they were wrong. Morning, Heidi, how are you? Okay, sorry, Haley Klotnick just joined. Okay, now, so I want you to just think for a minute. Can you imagine, if that's how the rule applies between two people, can you imagine if there's a king? And this king hears of a person, a low person, and this low person is in the mud, is in the dung. And this king comes to town, and out of all the people in the town, he picks that person. He says, I love that person, that low person who's messing around with lowly people, who finds himself in a smelly place. And the king comes and says, I love that person. I want that person. And he takes him out. He himself takes him out of the dung, and he puts him in his carriage, and he takes him to his palace. And not only does he take him to his palace, he takes him to the first chamber and the second chamber, and he takes him to the inner chamber, and he feeds him on with the best cutlery, crockery, and the finest cuisine. And not only that, he takes him into the room and he embraces him, and he showers him with gifts. Even if that lowly person had a heart of gold, because the king had showered such love upon him and chosen from the other 50,000 people in the village, all of a sudden his heart would soften. Now let's relate that to God. Think of it. 1 in 50,000 people in the world are Jewish. And Hashem came to us and he took us out of Egypt, and he has a special relationship with us called the mitzvahs. Now, when you don't understand the mitzvahs, we look at it as restrictions. I can't do this, I can't do that. The truth of the matter is, each one of these mitzvahs are the most amazing excuse that Hashem says, I'm giving you this to connect to me. And that is how you can start to inculcate, you can start to arouse a love for Hashem. And this I will tell you. You think you don't have love, but the love is there. Sometimes that love can be like a wellspring. It can be diverted, it can be blocked up. You just have to dig, and all of a sudden that love will come shooting through. There was a lady in South Africa who went through the Holocaust. And after going through the Holocaust, she was so cross, she refused to walk into a shul. I think she was the frumest lady. I mean, what she was saying to Hashem, I don't understand you. I don't understand how you did that. But anyways, 6-7 months before she died, she wrote a letter to the Rebbe. She wrote a letter to Hashem. And she said, Hashem, I want you to know I forgive you for the Holocaust. And that story just grows in me every day, because a Jew has a natural love for Hashem. Now, when we speak about love, just while we're on the subject about love, what the mission is really saying of you, of course, you've got to start your relationship with a reciprocal relationship with Hashem. Yeah, reward. But the truth of the matter is, you have to transgress. You have to get to a level beyond that. Now, by some tzaddikim, they can get to the level of love that's called klois hanefesh. And now you'll understand something in the book of Tehillim. In the book, and by the way, if anybody doesn't have a Chabad Tehillim that we produced last year, please WhatsApp me and I'll get you one. And we have a beautiful app that you can download. But if you look in King David's Tehillim, the times that he says, Kol nafshi, or tzomelecho nafshi, my soul is thirsty for you. My soul wants to leave my body. A person can get to a level of love for Hashem where all they want to do is their soul wants to leave their body. Now, if you remember the famous biblical reading that we read on Yom Kippur about 2 of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, right? What was their sin? They died on Yom Kippur. What really happened is they aroused such a love for Hashem within themselves that their soul just slipped out of their body. So what was their sin? They should have fought to keep it in. They could have. But that is not just unique to them. Tzaddikim, King David, went through that experience many times. Ba'al korchecha tochai, against your will you live. He doesn't want to leave. His soul wants to leave the body. When the Rabbi Chayaie used to say a mystical discourse, he had 2 types of speeches. One was a mystical discourse. He would hold on to a red handkerchief underneath the table. It wasn't visible to everybody, but those who knew, the tradition was that the Rebbe was reaching such a longing, an ecstasy, a love for Hashem, that if he wouldn't have held on to something physical, his soul would have escaped his body. And there are many, many, many stories like that, where the soul, where the tzaddik has to fight to keep his soul in. By the way, that is the secret of Lecha Dodi. If you know the words well of Lecha Dodi, Likras Kala, Shlomo Alkabaz composed it. Lecha Dodi, come my beloved. Who's he speaking to? Hashem. Those people on a Friday afternoon used to reach such a level of longing for God, God became known as their beloved. Likras, to meet, Kala, not the Kala, the bride, but Kala, their klois nefesh. They're longing for Hashem. So without going into too much detail about that, what a person can achieve is an absolute love for God that you cannot even believe that you have. And woe to the person who doesn't feel love. It's meditation, it's reading, it's thinking about God. And that's what Antigonus Ishsoich is saying. Don't have a cold relationship with God. Don't have a business relationship with God. Of course you can at one level, but there also has to be this longing for Hashem. This longing for Hashem, Hashem, I just want to satisfy you. That's what he was saying. He also says, but the fear of Hashem has to always be upon you because you need both. You need love and you need awe of God. You need love. Fear is the lower level of awe, fear of repercussion, or awe, where I just stand in awe of God. And you need both those wings to allow you to soar up on high. They become the two wings. And if everybody sitting in this year, all of us, we can get to the level where we have a love felt in our heart and an awe felt in our heart. The way we do it is through meditation. It's all about thinking. And that's the difference. Just one sec. That's the difference, by the way. That is the difference between a materialistic love and a spiritual love. You wake up in the morning, even if you've had a big supper last night, or even if you've just eaten a meal, you've eaten a whole meal, and you see a chocolate cookie, you want the chocolate cookie. But I don't even need it. I've eaten so much. That's the way it is. You never walk past the city and say, oh, I feel like davening. But if you sit down and you think about Hashem, where your mind is, where you project your mind will be your emotions. Let's repeat that. Where you project your mind will be your emotions. If you think about God, you think about the goodness of God, all that God's given you, the 1 in 50,000 of us are Jewish, who's chosen us, all of a sudden will arouse a love and a fear for God. A love and a fear. Now, there was another reason why he said it. And this is a secondary teaching. And there's such a fundamentally down-to-earth lesson from this. And that is as follows. A person has to be very careful with what you say. And a teacher has to be very careful with what they say. And I certainly have been guilty for it, where I've said something sarcastic, not meaning to, and the person's misunderstood it. Over here, he said that the fear, he said, what did he say? His whole teaching was, don't serve God for reward. Now here, I don't have any students here. Let's say thousands of students. 2 of his great students, 2 very clever students, kept hearing this. Now, often, if the ethics are brought in this book, it means that the teacher often said them, right? These were their credos. So 2 students over here, who didn't particularly have fear, misunderstood what Antigonus said. Look at how they misunderstood what he said. Antigonus was saying, serve God, not just because of reward, but you have to have a relationship with God that transcends reward. It must be God because I love you. Of course there's reward and of course there's punishment, but your relationship has to be beyond that. They, for whatever reason, misunderstood this, and they felt that what Antigonus was saying is that there's no life after death, right? Don't serve with God to receive a reward because there isn't. They misunderstood it. And they started 2 different religions that came back to haunt the Jewish people for many years, by the way. And therefore, Antigonus always had that line that you always have to have the fear of God upon you, because if they would have had the humility, if they would have had the awe, if they would have had the fear of God, they would never have come up to such a conclusion. So it also teaches you the most amazing thing, that fear, awe, respect, which causes you to question things, which causes you to ask people for advice, is a fundamental to not going off the straight and narrow. And that's why I said to you that even if you have all the love in the world, love is not enough to keep a relationship together. Love has to have discipline. It has to have boundaries on all levels, both within the husband, wife themselves, and both in their own personal lives. Any questions on that Mishnah? Good. Any questions? I'm so good.
Yeah,
I'm
Rabbi,
so good.
When did Antigonus live? When did he fall into was he the Tanaim?
He was a Tana. The Shimon HaTzadik was the first of the Tanoim. So he probably lived about 400 years after the building, 400 years before the destruction of the second temple, right at the beginning of the first temple. Right at the beginning of the second temple. What I will do is straight afterwards, I will WhatsApp the group a timeline where everybody lived, right from the beginning of the creation up until modern times. I'll put it on the group. Okay, so he was after Shimon HaTzadik, the temple was already built, and comes Antigonus. Now, after Antigonus, there was no more one leader. There were 2 leaders. One leader was Yossi ben Yoezer. He was the leader of the Jewish community, and Yossi ben Yochanan was the head of the Beth Din. So you had 2 leaders. Up until then, you had one. So you had the men of the Great Assembly, Shimon HaTzadik. It's an interesting thing, not for now. What happened to Shimon HaTzadik's kids? Why they didn't take over afterwards? But then the person who took over was none other than Antigonus Ish Soicha. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the only teaching in the whole of the oral law that you have of his teachings. But he obviously was the leader of the Jewish people. Now, Yossi ben Yoezer Ish Tzareda, Mishnah 4, and Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim Kiblo Mehem. I want to stop at this juncture and say that when a group of ladies and myself, when we learn 20 minutes or 30 minutes of Torah now, what we're doing is we're bringing godliness into this world. It's not only becoming interwoven in our brains, it's elevating us, it's inspiring, illuminating our houses. It's making godliness go viral in this world to defeat a pandemic. And we must always remember the power of Torah, whatever Torah we're learning, particularly this dimension of Torah, which is teaching you how to be a mensch. So Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzareda, Yossi ben Yochanan Yushalam Kibla Behem. Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzareda, he came from Tzareda. And he said, have your beischa beisvad lechachomim, let your house, make your house the meeting place for the sages. Roll or sit in the dust of their feet, and drink with thirst their words. Now, actually, to tell you the truth, that sounds quite silly and seems quite stupid. When you fall in love with a sage, when you fall in love with who said it, this is actually tremendous, and it is an amazing down-to-earth lesson for all of us. I think the secret to this whole Mishnah is when the Mishnah tells you where he came from Tzareda. Now, you must remember today we can communicate with people all over the world. Within 1 second, I can speak to somebody in Australia quicker than I can speak to my own neighbor. Because my own neighbor, I'm going to go walk out of my house, walk there. Within 1 second, I can speak to somebody in America, Australia, wherever it might be. Okay, now I want you to go back a few hundred years and imagine what it was like living in a country community. Imagine what it was like living in Beaufort West, where there was a Jewish community, or Berace, or one of these small communities, right? Very small. What was on the sage's mind? The continuity of the Jewish people of Torah. And he said like this: if you live in a little place called Tzareda, where I imagine there are not too many sages around, and there's not too much ambience around, the secret to it all, the secret to life, the secret to your kids being successful. Remember what was his mind. He defined success as Torah learning, etc. Torah values is make your house the meeting place for sages. What does that mean? When your kids will come home and they will see that the sages are congregating, the sages have something to speak about. It's a communal issue. And where do they go? Imagine in those days, there probably weren't town halls. Your house, your parents' house, or your house is the meeting place for the sages. There's ambience in the home. There's an ambience of importance. And not only that, don't give them the keys and walk away. Sit there, sit in the dust. Let's give one of the explanations as follows. In the old days, you didn't have marble tiles or ceramic tiles. You sit on the floor, you sat on the dust. But it means something more. It means follow what they say. In other words, when your kids see that you're sitting, you're not just giving them the keys and going to a movie, but you're sitting there and you're sitting in the dust and you're taking in what they're saying, you're drinking with thirst their waters, what is going to happen? Your kids are going to realize the importance, what's truly important to you. In other words, what this mission is telling you, if you're living in a little dorm, if you're living in a bit of away from the scene, and you need to keep continuity, it's all about the ambience in the home. And I will tell you like this. If there's somebody who's a stockbroker and him and his wife every single day, when he comes home, they speak stockbroking with love, what do you think the kids are going to do? The kids are going to want to invest in the market. If he's speaking property, what do you think is going to be? And he's loving it, and that's property's everything, bang, kids are going to go into property. If the parents are sitting there every single day, knocking everybody else, mentioning bad and speaking bad, the kids are going to grow up negative. The Gemara that says, how do you know what the parents are speaking about at home? Listen to what the kids say at school. Your kids see the best way to teach. This Mishnah is the most brilliant Mishnah. This Mishnah is telling us the best way to teach is example. And the ambience in the home is the most important. If there's an ambience of love, of caring, of sharing, the kids pick it up. That's what he was saying. And you can apply it to so many levels in life. What you live, your kids will pick up. Far more what you teach. I once saw a story, I'm sure you all know it. It's coming to December. A lot of people go to Plettenberg Bay. In Plettenberg Bay, there's, I think, a place called Monkey Land. So there's a parent who said, there's a husband and wife, they send their kids to Christian Brothers College or Hilton in Durban to get the finest education. Kid comes back from Hilton, from Michael House, and the kid's 12 years of age after being in boarding school for Standard 5. He comes back. Kid's 12 years of age. They go to Monkey Land, and it says, Monkey Land says, over 12, 100 Rand, under 12, 50 Rand. And the father and mother turn to the kid and say, do me a favor. I know you've just turned 12, but it's only 2 days ago. Pretend you are 11. Just tell them you're 11. At that moment, the parents have taken 250,000 Rand a year on my class fees and destroyed the entire education. Because the kid picks up the sincerity, the honesty, the ambience of the home more than anything. And that's what it becomes. It's about ambience at home. It's about what you speak about at home. It's about what you love at home. And that's why, by the way, people don't understand it, but the genius of Jewish law, that on Friday night, you're not allowed to have cell phones and you're not allowed to do this, and don't look at the restrictions. Look at what Shabbos is giving us. A guy comes home, in showing love, how do you show love? Every husband and wife love each other. The truth of the matter, if you don't say it and you don't do something, the wife doesn't know. And you can have people who are deeply in love and they don't show it. You have to show it through action, speech, and thought. And that's why there is a concept in Jewish law connected to this week's Torah portion of giving gifts. But you have to say it. If you think about Friday night, what is Eishes Chayil? A husband comes home, whether the wife works or doesn't work, she's prepared the most beautiful Shabbos table. He walks in and doesn't even notice it. You stop there. You sing Shalom Aleichem and you sing a poem to your wife. You sing a poem to show appreciation. And that's the most amazing. I just want to end off in the 3 minutes we've got, if I may, just to share something with this week's Parsha connected to what we're learning. In this week's Parsha, first of all, it says that Avram ba b'yomim. Avram came in his days. Sarah died. It's for you, Chayaie Sarah. Sarah had died. She lived life to its fullest, this woman. You can learn so much from her. She lives life to its fullest. Anyway, she dies. Avram now has to marry off Yitzchak. He sends his faithful servant Eliezer to find a match for him. It's a 21-day journey, and it takes 1 day. So I spoke to you about teleporting. It takes 1 day. So 2 questions I want to ask you. Why does the Torah say that Avram ba b'yomim, he came in his days? What does that mean? Strange wording. Ba b'yomim, he came in his days. And secondly, why did Eliezer's journey, which should have taken 21 days, why does it take a day? So first of all, the first answer is ba b'yomim, because you can read the words ba b'yomim coming. The simple way you read it is Avram advanced in age. He became an old man. But if you read the Hebrew, it means ba b'yomim. He came with his days. What does it mean he came with his days? That by Avram Avinu, every day was perfect. And the same by Sarah. But it couldn't have been perfect because Avram was born up in a home of idolatry. Avram saw this, he saw that. Can't say that every day was perfect. Commentary says the most beautiful thing. Eventually in life, if you do get your life perfect, then all the days that you made mistakes, intentionally or unintentionally, become part of the success. It's like a person who experimented 100 times for an invention, which eventually comes right. The 99 times are no more failures. It's all part of the success. And that's our life, by the way. Our life is about having a focus, whether it be fixing up a character flaw, achieving materialistically, bringing up kids, whatever your goal is. As long as you keep focused, eventually when you get it right, Bobby, every day is perfect. That's number one. Now, why did this 21-day journey? So now let's just jump to another story. Eliezer does a 21-day journey in 1 day. If you read the Chumash, he said, I left today and I came today. So why? Why did God make that happen? The simple explanation, simple one, is that you see, I'm going to keep it 2 more minutes today, guys. The simple explanation is because Avraham Avinu was very frum. And because he was very frum, therefore, whatever possessions he had was dear to him. That means it doesn't mean he didn't give charity, but everything was thought through. God gave it to me. I don't just squander it. A gambler squanders. Somebody else gives away with thought. God had made him very wealthy. He had to give a dowry to Yitzchak to get married. Now, when to date that dowry? If he dates the dowry on the day that Eliezer leaves, it means it's going to take for 21 days. He's going to, in advance, he's going to give his properties, his wealth away. You're not supposed to do that. You only give it away when you need to. If he writes a post-date check, I give my properties to my son in 21 days. Post-date check is not great in Jewish law. So he dates it that day, even though he knows that he's giving it away 21 days early. God makes a miracle because he is so meticulous about the laws that God makes a miracle that it doesn't go out a moment unnecessarily. There's another explanation, and that is a much deeper explanation. Each and every one of us has a different journey in life. Yitzchak was born into a father and a mother who were gold. Beautiful family. It was calm at home. It was beautiful at home. It was religious at home. Everything was great. Rivka, on the other hand, was brought up in a Bonnie and Clyde family, right? The father was a gunner. Everything was complicated there. Bonnie and Clyde family. Whatever reason God gave Rivka and others in life, that sort of difficult journey, that's for God to answer. But that's her journey. On the day that Rivka was ready for marriage according to Jewish law, right? On the day that she was ready for marriage, Abraham realized that. Remember, Abraham was a tzaddik. He immediately sends out Eliezer. He says, go and get her. Rivka is like a thorn. Rivka is like a rose amongst thorns. What does that mean? She's brought up in a Bonnie and Clyde family. It's like a rose. The thorns. Why did God make the prettiest, the queen of all the flowers, grow amongst thorns? Why not like the daffodil or the tulip? Why dafka the roses amongst the thorns? Anyways, on the day that the flower is ready to be picked, on the day that she is ready for marriage, according to Jewish law, Avram sends Eliezer to go get her. In order that the rose shouldn't be one more day amongst the thorns, in order that Rivka shouldn't be one more day amongst Bonnie and Clyde, God makes a miracle that a 21-day journey teleports, the land shrinks, and it takes a day. And of course, the down-to-earth lesson for all of us. Through this pandemic that we're going through, we find ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in. Right? It's hard for many. Or even nationally, the Jewish people find themselves waiting for Mashiach. One thing we can be sure, that at the right time, whether it be financially, whether it be emotionally, whether it be in a relationship, at the right time, God will even make a miracle that we should be plucked from the thorns and move on. And why is that so important? Because what we have, sometimes we're in life amongst thorns, and it's difficult. And you question, why is all this happening to me? At the right time. You've got to do whatever you have to do to get out. You have to show God that you're ready. But at the right time, bang, God will do it. So that's my bracha, please God, to everybody today. Please God, we should all have an ambience of happiness and Torah in our houses. And please God, by next year, we should have this year in Yerushalayim with Mashiach. May he come immediately. See you all next week.
Amen. Amen.